This is like a week or so old, but I thought it was worth rolling in just if we're talking about the state of Ubisoft as a whole anyway. This was Tom Henderson on Insider Gaming, who essentially said that the developers have been given a deadline for when they need to turn the game around by in order for the post-launch content to continue. And he writes that they have until the end of Season 3, which hasn't started yet. That comes out in like a month or so. And if player numbers aren't up, apparently that's kind of it for XDefiant. He said that's insane. I know, right? He says that his sources say that the concurrent players across all platforms is, quote, much less than 20,000. He said that 20,000 would have been optimistic, but apparently it's way under that. And he said like the kind of weird paradox with this, because it was only a few months ago when XDefiant launched that Ubisoft was saying, hey, our reports are better than we thought it would be because XDefiant has done so well. It's got to so many millions of players and people are loving it. Apparently, they've just dropped off. I haven't kept up with XDefiant myself. I don't know how the post-launch content has been, but apparently it's been hemorrhaging players and they need Season 3 to be good. Otherwise, they might kind of just cut ties with it. But again, we talk about Concord so much. I just think this is another example of how hard it is, man, to make a live service game that people care about in the long term. You can have a game that reaches, in this case, I think it was 8 million players across the first week or so. But that kind of is meaningless if you don't have the retention, and getting that retention is almost harder than getting anyone in to begin with.
Because the thing is, like, XDefiant was in the top 10 on the PlayStation Store when you would go to search for things. It did really well on Xbox as well. But like you said, it was only really across the first couple of weeks. I wonder how much that was just the idea of, oh, it's like Call of Duty, but it's free. I can just dip in, I can have a few matches now and see how it goes. It played well enough. But like you said, the retention's not there. The interesting thing for me is the corporate approach to live service, where there's almost like a lack of respect for the genre, or the lack of respect for the idea of maintaining the servers, maintaining the multiplayer, just saying, well, we're not going to support it next year or in a year's time, so just cut it loose now. Like, Concord dying in 2 weeks is insane.
Oh, it's ridiculous,
and then you've got all the, like, but not even like, it's you're never really 100% going to be able to say this thing is unsalvageable or whatever, but they are saying that with Concord. I know that the specific statement was that we were going to find the right path forward or something like that, and whether that path is just a dead end, we don't know, and maybe it's going to be a free-to-play thing or whatever. But I do wonder, like, you think about like the server upkeep, the developer pay, like the fact that you've got to maintain this stuff in a way that you don't when a single-player game is put out, and as you're patching, it just gets to live there, and word of mouth might spike sales or whatever. But it's like you're getting this weird corporate thing about how discordant multiplayer is, where it's like, we're just not going to support it, and it's now done, giving people a couple of seasons or whatever it is to try and bring things back around. To me, just points at how much of a cash grab all this stuff is. Where it's like, well, the grab failed, we didn't reach enough, or we didn't troll enough stuff up, so game over and we'll try again.
Hey, you know what? You've touched something there that I kind of really want to talk about, because a bit of insider baseball, I'll let people in on my trauma. I actually shot a solo Concord news yesterday that was supposed to be more of an editorial where I had a load of points. I did it, Scott. The microphone was busted, and I had to call in absolute hero Ewan Patterson to just do it as a more improvised news style video just to get something out, and it was absolutely guttering. But one of the things that I didn't get to in that second video that I did in the first scrapped one was what you just said there, and I wonder whether Concord was scrapped so soon because their plans, their admittedly ambitious plans, would have just cost too much money. Like, not only the post-launch support in terms of map tweaks or patches or whatever, but those cutscenes are really high quality, and that would cost a lot of money. So I imagine if your game doesn't sell and you're faced with this pipeline that you've promised, and that pipeline is going to cost a hell of a lot of money, but you're not keeping players, like, I think it's dumb to announce that in the first place, assuming anyone would care, but maybe, I don't know, in a way, maybe it's a better move to kind of make that drastic decision and say, rather than spend the millions that's going to cost to produce this, let's try to figure it out right now. And sometimes I think that might work, but more often than not, it just leaves these supposed live service games, these living and breathing things that have content drops and roadmaps and all of this stuff promised, like just feeling like a ghost town, a wasteland by the end of it. keep thinking about that Capcom shareholder comment from their Q&A, where one of the shareholders was asking Capcom, like, how much profit has the Street Fighter 6 DLC made? Do we need that team to continue working on it? And they were like, well, we promised the content. Like, we're not going to reveal the profits. It seems like it's doing all right, but like, sometimes you've got to invest, and you're not always going to get an immediate return on that investment. So that's where the paradox comes from, I think, because I do sometimes think that developers have really good, cool, grand plans for games, but that support from the executives who are funding that game is never guaranteed. And it's like, I mean, Anthem deciding whether to make Anthem 2.0 or just cut their losses. Like, so many times these devs just cut their losses. Same with Destiny right now. Destiny financially apparently not in a good place, so we're not going to get any more major expansions. We're just going to get these smaller free updates.
I tell you what's fascinating actually is that the inverse of this is about to happen with Dragon Age Veilguard, where that game started as a live service Dragon Age game. Obviously, that was received horribly for the bits and pieces that leaked. And then there is that story out there about how it started as a live service game, and then now it is a story focused, trying to connote old school BioWare story-driven, choice-driven RPG. And that's got a lot more, I was going to say a lot more buzz than the live service version. I still feel like people are quite sort of cautiously optimistic about the idea of a return for BioWare, but it's almost like the writing is back on the wall of saying like, hey, look, single player is a lot more viable and potentially a lot more supportable long-term as well, providing you can get the bigger bulk over the finish line immediately. It's interesting thinking about it in the abstract of getting a bigger chunk of game over the finish line in front of people, and then patching it. Maybe you're doing DLC, maybe you're doing add-ons like No Man's Sky, or trying to piecemeal it and drag it out over the course of a year and monetize the whole thing along the way. I feel like at this point, more people are aware of the latter, and they push back immediately by just not playing that piecemeal offering that is at the beginning. And then now you get the corporate response to that, which is, well, we're not going to support it then. And then there's the amount of bodies, the amount of just human effort that is strewn to the side when that happens over and over again is nothing short of just tragic and hilarious. It's stupid at this point. But 2 weeks for a Sony game to be shut down, and then for XDefiant, which initially had so much momentum, to maybe follow suit, I think you would hope points to the idea of a gaming feature being more rooted in single player worthwhile experiences again.
Yeah. I mean, things have got to change, right? I think Concord is definitely like a turning point at the very least for Sony. Again, I said it in that news yesterday, and everyone thought I was being silly for saying it, but genuinely, to me, it was more surprising to see Concord pulled than it was to see like Microsoft buy Activision. You know what I mean? There was a precedent set. It was ridiculous. It was I wasn't expecting it. Not saying I was predicting it, but there was at least a precedent set for that, right? I have never seen a first-party major exclusive that's been pushed this much immediately be ripped from stores, immediately deliver refunds, for the executives to immediately say, we got this wrong. Like, everything that we've mentioned today, Anthem, even XDefiant has had a year, 6 months, a few seasons to find its feet.
Destruction All-Stars is still going.
Destruction All-Stars is still going. You know what I mean? These games that even some of the biggest bombs, it's like, right, they've been given time, and this one was just like immediate. I couldn't believe it. Still kind of can't.
I think in this case, if Concord / I always get their name wrong, I'm sorry. I think a Firewalk, I think is the
Firewalk, yeah.
It's because Fire Sprite is someone else, and my mind will not separate the two. Also, Firewalk with me is a thing. But with Concord, that game was acquired. Firewalk were acquired. It was already in development, I think for like 4 years or 5 years by the time Sony swooped in and said, hey, we'll help you finish it off. And you can see that in the motion captured cutscene stuff. Because you've seen the developers from Firewalk on Twitter just saying, look, we started as a bunch of people shoulder to shoulder in an attic, in a loft and basement, and whatever, just getting bits and pieces of the game over the finish line, which is awesome. But I think because it was acquired and wasn't fostered from the ground up from Sony, like Destruction All-Stars was, like the devs from the Destruction Derby days, that's why they were just, that idea of it being more discordant maybe came around, where I still think it was a Jim Ryan idea anyway, like the big live service push, like, well, that looks good, we'll get one of them, drag that in. It doesn't work, and then now that he's gone, you've got the new twin leadership of him and Holst and Hideaki Nishino just saying, "Look, we don't even want this anymore. We didn't want this when we came in, and now it's underperforming like we thought it would. Sever it, move it to the side. We're moving forward."
I just think, again, I don't want to just repeat the news video, but like I said it yesterday, that to me, I blame Sony so much for that. And whether it was Jim Ryan, I imagine it probably was. I mean, you don't buy a company, no matter how big or small, without the CEO of the company that's doing the buying, knowing and really pushing for it. But I would maybe understand this if this discarded nature if Sony hadn't bought Firewalk, if it was just a second-party relationship. But to me, they looked at when did they get bought? I'm pretty sure it was like April last year or something. If my notes are correct, which they
cheeky little Google, April 2023.
There we go, April of last year. You know what I mean? You don't buy a studio that's been cooking a game like this a year and a half out from its release. Less than that, we're just over a year out from its release, and you know what you're getting at that point, right? You know it's impressed you enough, and to me, I don't know. I think it's them who's going to bear that responsibility of them going, we wanted this, we put it out there, and maybe we've made a mistake. And I just think I'm not saying Firewalk couldn't have maybe made a better game. I don't think it's a bad game, Concord, but I keep saying this, they delivered the game that Sony wanted, you know?
Yeah. Well, going in, like you said, the acquisition happening at the beginning of 2023, like you said, it's only a year and a bit out from release. Most of this game would have been together. I know the games get assembled, different genres affect this differently, but the core components of what the game is, assumedly, would have been front and center to know what they were getting into. So for whatever, obviously they saw that vision of a Overwatch style game and thought, this is perfect kind of thing. But the way that it rolled out and then the speed to cut it down, I just think it's fascinating in regards to just communicating directly with the audience. We don't believe in this as much as you don't. And not only do we agree with you that it shouldn't be out there, we're actually going to sever it and not even, renew the marketing, maybe put it on PS Plus, something like that. I wonder whether it's just too cooked overall at this point, where even if it was on PlayStation Plus, if that would actually do anything. But yeah, overall, to bring it back to Ubisoft, it's a hell of a time to try and figure out the industry. If you're someone like Ubisoft who has one foot in the single player, one foot in the live service, it's a bad time.
Apparently just a hell of a bad time to release a game. Apparently you can't even release a good game and get success anymore. It's gotta be something special every time.